it's not rocket science. If you want to know how to make the student experience better, ask the students. If you want to know what the community needs, where you might have the opportunity to fulfill that need, ask the industry leaders, ask your local politicians, ask your neighbors. They weren't used to this. They were used to being at war with the university all the time, especially the neighbors. But we included them in that, and they have good ideas. And then they see that we use their ideas. It changes the whole relationship.
Welcome to Radical Cooperation. I'm Dr. Michael Horowitz, Chancellor of the Community Solution Education System. In my 40 years in higher education, I've seen that the most impactful institutions are those that connect with their communities, forming partnerships that benefit students, local organizations, and society. So today I'd like to explore how universities can work with businesses, local communities, and industries to create meaningful impact. And I have a great guest for that very topic. Welcome to Michael Alexander, former president of Lasell University. You were in that role for 16 years, and you led the university through tremendous growth, expanding both academic programs and key partnerships. So it's great to have you. And Michael, I'd like to start hearing a little bit about your journey to LaSalle and then what inspired your focus on partnerships with the Boston area community in which LaSalle is.
Well, thank you, Michael, for inviting me to join you today. I'm delighted to be here on this important topic. About my own background, I knew from the time I was in college that I wanted to be a small college president, particularly small college, because I felt that's where you get the best, most personal, individualized education. So I tried to go the direct route by studying higher education in graduate school and got a master's degree in higher education from Ohio State. Ended up back at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where I completed all my coursework, my doctorate. Actually never completed the dissertation because of what I'm about to tell you in a minute. I worked in higher education for 9 years at Smith College, Ohio State, Harvard, where I was an assistant dean, and Barnard College in New York City, two of the 7 sister colleges I worked at. And during that time, I was also a student at the Harvard Graduate School of Education during the latter part of that time. But then my life went down one of those serendipitous paths you don't plan. I had to follow my wife, to Los Angeles. We had tried that commuting marriage thing. It didn't work for us. So she's an actress, had to go to LA. I went there, and before I knew it, I was working for one of the Hollywood studios. That wasn't the plan. And within a year and a half, they taught me the business and had me running companies. Asked me to move back to New York, where I ran the USA Network. My title was Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, but the place was in trouble and losing $20 million a year. And within 2 years, I got it straightened out and turned around and running the way it pretty much still runs even today, decades later. Then MCA Universal, the studio I worked for, bought a New York TV station. I ended up running that. And it grew tremendously and was very successful. It had been the worst station in the market, and we went up to number 2 in the market, being 3 of the network owned and operated stations in New York, the biggest market. So that was quite successful. There was a series of transactions where MCA Universal got sold to a Japanese company, and foreign companies can't own broadcast interests. So my company got spun off into a public broadcasting company. So I ran a public company, traded on the New York Stock Exchange for a while. 2.5 years later, sold that to a bigger broadcasting company. Took kind of my minor winnings from that and bought a technology company with private equity backing and ran a technology company that was headquartered back up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, bringing me back to where I'd been before, and then lived in Massachusetts from then on through my retirement at LaSalle. But what I really wanted to do was be a small college president. I kept my hand in all those 24 years I was running companies. I was on the board of Bloomfield College in New Jersey, on the board of Antioch University. I helped to found 2 foundations that had to do with education. And I read the Chronicle for all those 24 years.
That's so interesting because to me, your sets of experiences would make you a very capable college president, yet it's not the typical way higher ed recruits its presidents. Yet you had a sense of budgets and markets and transactions and really all these many things that become part of a college president's job.
In addition, I knew about managing debt, about investing, about how to handle a a breach in your IT systems, about how to manage a sexual harassment case. I mean, these are all things that you face in the corporate world that a new president, if they don't have that experience, doesn't know. And so, yes, it turned out when I became president of LaSalle, which is what I really wanted to do, and that was just fortunate that the search firms found out about me and started including me in their searches as a non-traditional candidate. And luckily enough, I got the job at LaSalle. Whole story behind that. 20 minutes from my home in the Boston area, and the rest is history. For 16 years, I was the president there, and we had a great run. Interrupted somewhat by COVID at the end, but still going strong, and has some unusual characteristics, including the fact that it owns and operates a continuing care retirement community called Lasell Village, which we'll talk about later, is unique among retirement communities. But I think one of the reasons I got the job is that I had a history of running businesses where I didn't know the industry before I ran it. And so they needed somebody who could run both businesses, both a university and a retirement community. And of course, we were successful on both fronts.
Well, that's interesting. Recently, I talked to Paul LeBlanc, who ran Southern New Hampshire, and he said increasingly he felt it was important to hire people who weren't so sure they knew all the answers, that were comfortable with uncertainty, they were comfortable delving into new areas and disciplines. Would you say that those prior experiences in the corporate world and globally and different industries kind of set you up for this idea of, I'm going to connect LaSalle to the broader community?
I think so, yes, because for instance, running the broadcasting companies, I was very involved with the local colleges and universities. At Channel 9 in New York, we took 60 interns per semester, 3 semesters per year, 180 students per year. And I worked closely with them because I cared about education, right? We started a foundation that supported education in New Jersey. So I kept my hand in from the corporate side, and I understood the benefits from the corporate side of being involved with a higher education partner. So when I started at LaSalle, it was natural for me to do that kind of thing. Now, I think this is a really important topic right now, and this next might be a little bit of a downer, because if you think about it, every college and university is vital to its community. They produce active, engaged citizens. They're the engines for the local economy. They help. With any local problems, and even provide arts and music that might not otherwise happen in that community. With so many colleges closing, those communities are being devastated. They're being left without the core of what the manufacturing and farming industries of those communities have waned over decades, and now to lose their main economic engine is just a tragedy for many.
So you've been very active recently speaking about the economic impact. Broadly, I think we're talking about what I call two-way learning. The college learns from its community and vice versa. You've made this explicit point about the economic engine. The fifth university in our system, which is essentially a startup, their accreditor makes us do an economic impact study. And it said this one new university in Wichita, Kansas would have a $1 billion impact over 10 to 12 years. And you're making the point that it's the economics, it's far beyond that. Why does that get such little attention, do you think? It doesn't seem to be something colleges talk about much. Again, when you see them close, there might be an article about the loss of jobs and employees and the local impact, but it doesn't seem like it gets the play that you would think it needs to.
I think it's frustrating because at LaSalle, we did a study every 3 years of the economic impact we had on the local community. And even for a little small place like LaSalle, it's hundreds of millions of dollars a year, both the direct and the indirect effects on the local community. Now, luckily in our community, Newton, Massachusetts, they recognized that. And they were great partners with us and helped us. That is the local government and corporations and churches, they recognize this and want to make, and they also had a college close in our community and saw, the negative sides of that. So I think because of it's such a challenging time for higher education, it's an important time for this question because it affects communities so much. Now, what inspired me? Your question was what inspired me to get involved with this, and I'd say the first, there were a number of factors other than the fact that I had experience on it from the other side. One is the changing demographics. We recognized as early as 2011 that in New England, the number of high school graduates is going to go down, and it's going to be challenging times for tuition revenue. And we had to find other means of revenue, other lines of business, if you will. So that caused us to do a lot of planning and thinking and talking to people. And one of those ways is to respond to local needs. So how do you respond to local needs? Well, you listen, to what people's problems are. And the way you generate that is by asking questions. So what we did, we went around to local communities in the Boston area. The life sciences are a big thing. And so I went to some of the life sciences companies, some of which are very large and some of which were startups, and asked them, what are your biggest problems? They were having trouble getting enough people to work in their labs that were qualified who wouldn't leave after 1 year, right? And so we started a health sciences program that prepared people specifically to work for those companies. This is good for our students because they want good jobs that are pay a little bit more than what you normally get. There are also jobs in science, so they have a lot of upside in your career as you go forward. There was a lot of biomanufacturing was just starting up in New England, and they were going to have to staff thousands of people. So we learned, we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't gone in, met with senior people at these companies and asked the question.
Those are great examples of two-way learning. Number one, I can't recall any other college saying on a regular basis, we do an economic impact study. I'm not sure many have done that ever, let alone on a regular basis. So that seems like a great piece of advice. Many universities will have programmatic or college-specific advisory boards. You're talking about it being much more explicit, I think, and you're doing it as the president, which I also think is very different. It's something I did when I started to develop new programs. I think higher ed has been reluctant to be cast as, let's say, vocational, but it can be a really healthy marriage of thinking and ideas. The academy doesn't have all the inspired thinking that needs to go into an academic program.
Well, I actually think a lot of colleges and universities do economic impact studies. I've seen many of them. Some of the big universities, they hire outside parties. They'll hire KPMG to do the study or somebody. And they try, where the frustration comes in is that we're not good at promoting it once we have it.
And would you say you've seen small institutions like LaSalle do it as well?
Yeah, sure. Not, fewer. But yes, I've seen, especially the ones I'm familiar with in Massachusetts, is not unusual. But none of us have figured out how to then make people aware of it. How do you spread? The newspapers don't want to. They're not going to cover that. It's not news to them. The TV station. How do you get that out there? We always make up a little brochure or pamphlet every time we do it, and try and spread that around so our alums find out about it. But it's frustrating because I don't think people in the community are aware of it, despite our efforts. And I think that's pretty universal. It's a frustration. We know how much impact we have. We have evidence to support it, but we can't get that word out. That's the frustrating part of it.
No, let's get into the story of LaSalle Village, because I do think that's a really great demonstration of partnership. And I believe you told me you inherited it, but you really made it bounce.
My predecessor and his team and the trustee at the time got the idea to do this. They were looking for other sources of revenue. All small colleges need other sources of revenue besides tuition. My grandfather, who was vice president dean of the faculty back in the 40s and 50s at Antioch College, told me that way back then. It's always been true. It becomes apparent every 20 years or so when we go through tough cycles. Well, the college was looking for other sources of revenue, and they found by talking to people in the community that there was this need for people when they retire or beyond retirement to live out the rest of their lives. There were no kind of high-end retirement community around at the time, and certainly not one that was associated with a college or university. So they went through a 10-year process of getting the approvals and doing the construction and doing the sales and everything, starting in 1990 and opened in 2000, LaSalle Village. And so it was filling a need for the community. These people, needed a place to go where if they couldn't continue to live in their homes or didn't want to, or they wanted a community of like people that would be stimulating both intellectually and socially. And it turns out LaSalle Village is unique among retirement communities because the residents there are required to partake in at least 450 hours per year of educational coursework or activity. It makes it different than any other retirement community in the world. And that attracts people who want that stimulation. And sure enough, they're more likely their quality of life is more likely to extend closer to death. Almost nobody appears to end up in memory care units.
Now, are they in the same classes as the college students?
Yes, they can take any class they want at the college. The faculty designs certain classes that are more attractive to them and promote them every year. But we also deliver classes specifically for them in their 16 building campus within a campus. So there's multiple ways they can do that. And a lot of things count as educational activity, but they're involved. If you think about that, that's more than an hour a day. So they're involved every day, almost every day, in some kind of educational, intellectual activity.
Is the campus physically connected?
Yes. Residents of LaSalle Village who want to participate in the ceramics program, they just walk right up the hill, about a 5-minute walk, and they're in the ceramics studio.
How did college students react to having a retirement community as part of their campus?
Well, one frustration, I've never been able to use it as a way to attract students, but once they're there, they discover it. And they love it because the interaction with it. We also have early childhood education programs, which is another example of responding to a need in the community. We have 2 early childhood education, a daycare center and a nursery school that serve the community and provide another source of revenue. So we have intergenerational activity that goes from some infants to people 100 years old. And they, people, they discover it and they really react positively at every level. The seniors love it because it's, being with young people is, vitalizing, it gets them going. And for the students, they end up using these people as research. They do internships there. And they have jobs there. It's the largest employer on campus, hiring about 50 students at a time.
It's core to the mission academically, or it enhances the mission. And presumably it's making money, as you said, saving money. I think you also formalized the governance structure, which is very interesting. Maybe talk a little bit about your use of governance over these two LaSalle entities.
Well, before I got there, they had organized it in a way so there's a holding company called Lasell Inc., which is the sole member of LaSell University Inc. and LaSalle Village Inc. So they are under one umbrella with common management. So I was the CEO of LaSalle Village. The president of LaSalle Village, who runs it every day, reported to me, not to the board, even though LaSalle Village had its own separate board. And as you said, that we provide service, the university provided services to the village: management, technology, security, facilities, education, and more. And the village would pay the university for that. So the university would make money, but the cost that they would pay was lower than it would cost them to do it themselves or to outsource it. So financially it was very successful, but the intergenerational activity was even more successful because that causes LaSalle Village to be perceived as the highest quality retirement community in the area, perhaps in the country. And so even during the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, where occupancy levels dropped in retirement communities all over the country, they didn't drop at LaSalle Village.
That's very interesting.
You asked about governance. When I took over in 2007, it wasn't stable yet. It was only 7 years old, wasn't yet stable. One of the problems was, the residents didn't feel like they had a lot of control or influence on what was going on. It was, it would break even one year, lose money another year. So what we did is we put in a program for the residents to elect trustees to the LaSalle Village Board. That changed the governance. I mean, that changed everything. And now there are like 16 committees of residents who are involved. So they're very involved in the operation and oversight. of what goes on at LaSell Village. And they support more than anything that intergenerational activity in the educational function. So
The residents of LaSalle Village serve on this holding company board.
They serve on the LaSell Village board.
LaSalle Village board.
I also recruited members to serve on the Lasell University board, and they became some of our largest donors and most active members.
You integrated it. Yeah, we have found that same concept of the system. College trustees who join the system board serve on both. So you still had some tension or opportunity to make it better, and you evolved that governance model. But it sounds like the overall idea of holding companies serving two nonprofits has worked very well.
Yes, it causes them to always agree on things because they don't want the holding company coming on and telling them what to do. And the holding company has reserve powers, has never exercised them once.
You've built that shared purpose and the culture. We've talked about higher ed has been resistant to this kind of model. Do you think the success here has to do with the two entities being somewhat disparate, aligned, but not two colleges?
No, I actually think it was an accident. It was an accident because normally when a college or university starts a retirement community, they partner with a developer who, takes the risk and ends up, having a lot to do with management. They don't want anything to do with, they say, oh, if you require residents to do educational coursework, nobody will buy an apartment. Turns out that's the opposite of the truth. But what happened is at LaSell Village in the 90s, when they were building it, the developer went bankrupt. And so Lasell University was able to buy it and set up this structure with LaSalle Inc. and the two companies with the sole member controlling it. And so it was a luck of the draw that they end up with total control. Usually there's a partner involved, which makes it more complicated. It was true that at the beginning, the faculty said, old people in our classes, are you kidding me? But they quickly found out that they were additive, not subtractive. So that went away even before I came. And by the time I got to the faculty, were totally supportive of it. But I know other institutions have tried to copy our model and haven't been able to because the faculty resisted it.
Which has been a challenge in higher ed. Do you think this model can work where the college does not have the physical retirement community? In other words, they provide education resources to an independent retirement community, or is part of this physical and governance and shared infrastructure?
So there are over 100 retirement communities associated with colleges and universities in the United States. And they have some are very successful, some aren't, and they have various kinds of relationships, but none of them, except LaSalle Village, have this requirement to participate. And that makes it different. And also the sole membership thing makes it different. And I don't know anybody else that has that. So I do know a couple that built their own, so they own it outright, although they have a developing partner, but so they partially own it. But when they've tried to institute the educational thing, they said they wanted to and basically failed. That doesn't mean they won't be successful as retirement communities, but they won't have the level of intellectual and social interaction that LaSalle Village has.
So what would you say are the key elements during your presidency that created this radical cooperation culture? You mentioned initial resistance from faculty. You talked about some elements between the village and the college entities. How did you move it more toward collaboration than competition?
Well, as I said, some of that we were just talking about LaSalle Village. Now let's go back to other stuff. I mean, because recognize, one isn't enough. So we have the early childhood education programs, which all existed. LaSalle Village existed. It just made it work successfully and make more money and be, always. It has a over 200 person wait list, right? But by listening and talking to other local entities, like life sciences companies that need, lab and manufacturing employees, like cybersecurity, became a big issue with everybody. And I don't know what the number is now, but 2 years ago, there were 17,000 open cybersecurity jobs in Massachusetts alone, just one state. So now we're not alone. Everybody's starting cybersecurity programs, but it's a great thing for students, right? Because it's if you go through that program, you're going to get a job, and it's going to be paid. You're going to get paid more than a normal college graduate gets, and you have a lot of upside and a lot of skills. So that's an example. The another one is I had breakfast with the new president of our local hospital. The hospital that serves our students in our community. He was new, so I invited him to breakfast. I just asked the innocent question: "What's your biggest problem?" And he said, "Oh, I need employees in certain job categories I can't get. I got, everybody knows about the nursing problems and the traveling nurses." But he says, I have 50 open jobs, one hospital for surgical technologists. This is people who work in the operating room, and we can't get them. We can't keep them. And I need help. That caused us to start to partner and open a workforce development program for surgical technologists. There's a certifying board we had to work with and everything, but we got that going within a year. Within a year and a half, they had the first people coming out of the program and could go to work, who then had a certificate from LaSalle, 36 credits. They could apply to a degree if they wanted to go on to an associate's or a bachelor's degree.
So I'm hearing writ large over and over, talk to the outside community, get ideas, bring it to success internally. And people like to be part of successful institutions, but you really based it on partnership with the community around you, different industries, different populations, ideas coming from outside the academy. And somehow you made the academy comfortable with that, I would assume, from the success you had with that concept.
It's not rocket science. If you want to know how to make the student experience better, ask the students. If you want to know what the community needs, where you might have the opportunity to fulfill that need, ask the industry leaders, ask your local, politicians, ask your neighbors. So one of the things we did was, I'm a strategic planning person. I've led strategic planning for other institutions and companies. And so I started a strategic planning process as soon as I got there. I made sure we had people from the community and neighbors in the strategic planning process. Now, they weren't used to this. They were used to being at war, with the university all the time, especially the neighbors. And but we included them in that, so we would, and they have good ideas, and they know that, not all things you can do are worthwhile, but they'll come up with something and say, "Hey, that's something we can use." And then they see that we use their ideas. It changes the whole relationship.
That's incredible. I know you've been working on this lower cost consortium to build connectivity among colleges. How's that been working out?
That started in 2015 in a conversation between me and two other college presidents at a conference. And I had this idea. They said, "Oh, we should do that. We should do that." So we got Lumina to sponsor a meeting of 8 college presidents. So we started this organization called Lower Cost Models for Independent Colleges, because everybody's saying the business model is broken. You can't just keep raising tuition and raising the tuition discounts. Eventually, that's going to eat you alive. Your budgets won't work. And sure enough, that's happening all over. So we were looking for people who are willing to experiment with pilots or new programs that could be delivered at lower cost, so that students and their families might be able to afford it. The workforce development thing for surgical technologies is an interesting one. That's a 9-month program, that is 36 credits, and you really charge by the credit, so it's a much lower program to get them started, and then they can go on to the degree if they want or not. That's an example. We started a program called Lasell Works, where students who came in and were successful, low-income students who came in and were successful, we would reduce their tuition every year they returned, in exchange for them attending remotely one of those years and working at a job at the same time. So kind of a job online educational in their sophomore year, less expensive for us to deliver. We've passed the savings on to them. So other colleges had other experiments, for instance, partnering with a hospital, or delivering educational services to immigrant communities in the basement of a church. There are many examples, and quickly expanded to about 20 institutions. And we decided two objectives for the lower cost models, what we call LCMZ, Lower Cost Models Consortium. One was just to stimulate each other to do these experiments, to support each other with critical, constructive criticism, moral support, help overcome impediments that you're going to have, because there always be impediments to radical cooperation, right? And the other was to do programming together. And we said, let's start with something we think we can make happen. So we started by creating a certified financial planning program, a set of 7 courses that if students took it, they'd be qualified to take the certified financial planning test to become certified. Usually people don't get that certification until they're 5 or 6 years out of college. This gave them the opportunity to take it as soon as they finish college, or to set up as a minor or as a part of your major or as part of a certificate program. And we were able to do that with the 7 online courses. So any of our students at any of our institutions could take it. It's still going strong today. That program is still offered. It caused us to launch a platform called Rise, which is a course sharing platform where we allowed our institutions to put up online courses that anybody else in the consortium could offer to their students. It would allow people to open up new majors at very low cost, almost zero. As you know, starting a new program usually takes 3 years and costs hundreds of thousands of dollars for faculty, and you wait and you don't have enough students at the beginning. This way, your break even was like 3 students. So it allowed people, and I think Rise now offers about 20 different majors that our institutions could start. So we opened up the membership. There are now 130 institutions involved. The number of students involved in Rise classes continues to go literally like this every semester. It's growing by hundreds of registrations every semester. It has allowed our institutions to reduce it because it costs them less to deliver than their normal courses, is to not raise tuition as much. Has anybody actually been able to lower tuition because of it? Not yet. I think the volume has to get even higher.
Well, that's going to be tough because there's so many prices and costs that go up that are outside our control. But I mean, what I get the through line through our entire discussion is leave your office, leave your campus. There's so many pressures as a president, as you know, that pin you on campus, but you really have been inspiring with this thought of get outside, invite partners, invite other college presidents to brainstorm with you, invite the community into your strategic planning. And really, it is interesting. You made it sound simple, yet it's hard to execute well. Ask the student if you want to improve the student experience. Ask the outside employer or discipline if you want to make your program better.
If I could leave your listeners with just 2 thoughts, reiterate things we already said. Invite community leaders and neighbors to participate in your strategic planning process, and ask industry and community leaders what their biggest challenges are, especially practical ones like how do you find employees in difficult areas?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it with these very practical ideas you've given us. And so to learn more about today's topic, I do invite our listeners to explore LaSalle University's website, their community partnerships. Take a look at that retirement community. You can also visit the Lower Cost Models for Independent Colleges Consortium's website at the lcmc.org to learn about Michael Alexander's work on sustainable education models. And for more insights into radical cooperation, subscribe to the podcast and follow me on LinkedIn. So thank you for joining us on Radical Cooperation. Together we can build a future where universities and communities thrive through mutual learning and collaboration. See you next time.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a great conversation. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.